homepage of LawHelp New York in the desktop layout and the mobile layout, highlighting what the site will look like when this update that we've been talking about actually lands. You can see that there are a number of significant differences, or you may notice, and I want to take a moment to talk through with you now what those are and what is motivating them. And as I said, we can pause at any point for questions. So one of the things that we've done for this release is we received a variety of feedback from the LSC Ernst & Young evaluation and from an independent audit that we did in partnership with the Montana Legal Services Association. And in order to accommodate the various feedback that we got from those two sources in an efficient and powerful way, we have moved to a new technique for delivering all of the graphics on the site, which is not something that you need to worry about too much or think about too much. I mention it here to say that there have been some small changes to the colors of the site. There may be more changes to the colors of the site at some future point as we think through the color contrast issues that were brought up in the EY evaluation a little bit more carefully, hopefully next year. We've done some of that work now, and then also some of the color changes are related to work that we've done to make the colors more customizable going forward. So this code release is not going to have these capabilities quite yet, but we're setting ourselves up for an environment where you will have a much greater degree of control over the color palette of your individual website. And so you'll notice some small color changes as you look at the current version of the site versus what's going to be released, and that's related to the shift in the technique that's preparing the ground for this change. A major difference, and one that was discussed over the listserv in mid-May, is a move toward a new iconography for the LawHelp sites. And in May, over the listserv, I released an article to the community. I'm going to put it in chat now so you can take a look at it on your own machine if you haven't seen it yet.
Hey, Sam, can you hear me? It's Michelle.
Essentially,
Sam, we're getting on your, I think your voice is dropping in and out.
Sam, you're breaking up.
Some other user experience.
Sorry, let's, Sam, your voice is breaking up.
We've worked with over the past year have all called attention to the fact that
all right, I think he'll be right back. He's just going to switch to a phone. Thanks all for patiently waiting while we get Sam back connected here, and see a couple of I think comments about the VoIP quality, and then I'm just checking to make sure there are no other questions. If so, we can unmute people or make sure that we can get to those at the end of this segment that Sam's presenting here.
Hi everyone, I'm back. Sorry about that. What was the last thing you heard? I'll put it that way.
I think you started to on a previous screen or two, you were talking about the beginning to introduce the reason for the change in iconography. Right.
Right. Thank you. So I put a link in the chat to the article that I released over the listserv in the middle of May, and essentially, Ernst & Young and the auditor that we've worked with in partnership with the Montana Legal Services Association, a number of different user experience consultants have talked about how the current version of the LawHelp template has an inconsistent iconography. And so you can sort of see, everyone's very familiar with the legal topic icons, and this is their general style, and this is how the page utilities look, the print, email, share buttons that you see. Let me actually load up LawHelp Montana for a moment. Since we did, right, so you can see, the share, email, and print buttons look like this. The legal topic icons look like this. So these are flat and monochromatic. These have shading and appear in a bunch of different colors. And these kinds of inconsistencies can create confusion and also just mean that interpreting the page and orienting yourself on the pages take a little bit longer. And so for user experience reasons, it's, we've gotten lots of advice that we should make them more consistent. And then even within the LawHelp legal topic icons, there are some inconsistencies. My favorite example is that one consultant pointed out that this worker would never build this statue because in this worker's world, this is what people look like. And so he or she would build a statue of a person that looks like, like people look like in this world. And so there's been, we have all of these different icon sets, and they don't necessarily express a unified aesthetic. And so we set out to try and find a open source framework that we could extend to suit our needs that was similar enough to our existing topic icons, since these are the ones that as a community I think we've invested the most time and attention in, that we could transition fairly seamlessly to a more unified icon set. And so this has been a chance to try to find a stable open source base on which we can hopefully grow in the future, to create a common aesthetic into which future design that we do on the platform, whether here within Pro Bono Net or new graphics that are commissioned by individual states, if we have a unified aesthetic and a unified approach to the image technology that we're using, it should be much easier to make sure that new graphic work is available for everyone to take advantage of, regardless of which individual program creates it. And so this has been a process of identifying an open source framework that we can use for this stuff, translating the existing legal topic icons into that framework, both the default set and the particular extensions that specific states have made onto that set to create a more unified whole. So you'll see slight variations on the icons that you've been using, and you may also see some icons that were not previously available to you that will become available in the new set. This, for example, these blue ones, whenever you see them in this list, are icons that LawHelp Puerto Rico developed when it launched, that had not been available to the rest of the site, and many of them are in a very different aesthetic. whereas now the aesthetic is unified and all of the icons will be available everywhere. In this document, they're presented in black, but you'll notice here is the development site running on our test server, and you'll notice that these new icons are presented in their familiar green. The reason why they're black here is that, as I said, going forward, we've made changes to the technology we're using so that it will be very easy to change the color of things dynamically. So you'll have many more sort of color options as you go forward. Another thing I'll point out as we look at these is you'll sort of see that at this slightly larger size that I've printed them on here, the old icons start to lose their resolution, whereas the new technology that we're using will stay sharp at any size. So no matter how much you blow it up or how much you shrink it, it should continue to present a very crisp image. And this is helpful for accessibility purposes. It's also very helpful for situations where you may want to prepare print materials promoting the site, because all of these image assets will print out in a much clearer, crisper way, even with a professional print job. Whereas I imagine that those of you that have worked with these images in the past know that they don't necessarily print in a very pretty way. So these are all the reasons why I think that this is a really exciting change that is going to make it easier for us to keep our iconography unified in the way that it should be going forward. That'll make it easier for us to expand it to meet people's needs as new stuff crops up, whether we're doing that here or whether people are commissioning things on their own. That will make it easier for people to have the kinds of color choices that they want and to use these icons in lots of different contexts. But it has involved some shifts. So, this is a very small one. This is what the paintbrush looked like before. This is how the Google open source icon library that we're using as our new base represents paintbrushes. So this is a change that's happened. And you can sort of go through all of these and see how we've constructed an analog of the old icon using the particular aesthetic shapes available in the new system. And for some of those, it's a very clean transition. For some of those, there are small changes. For some of them, there are relatively larger changes. The single largest change, and I'm going to call your attention to it because I really do want to make sure that we have as complete a discussion about this as possible, that everyone has a chance to look at all of these choices and weigh in on them. The single largest change is in the family one, and frankly, this is purely an aesthetic choice on my part, which is why I'm most nervous about it, which is why I'm highlighting it. In the Google material icon library, people are these sort of peg people like this. They don't tend to stick their arms out to the side in the way that the old LawHelp people do. And if you look at one large peg person flanked by two small peg people, it did not feel like it was representing much of anything to me, and I acknowledge that. Whereas the material icon set had this stroller that I could work with, and so this is one where it's being represented in a substantially different way. If people want to see something different here, this is, of all of them, this is the one that I imagine will spark the most conversation, and where we potentially might have to come up with an alternative. And so I do want to call your attention to that. But they are all here on the screen. The link is in the chat. And so if people want to take a moment and look at all of them now, I would be very happy to have a conversation about any of them. I'll also call attention to the Statue of Liberty. I mentioned earlier that the worker in the icon world wouldn't create a statue like this. This is a statue that's hopefully a little bit closer to the kind of statue that a worker in this world might actually create. And then you can go through all of these and see the various changes that have been made. I think most of the transitions are pretty straightforward. And as I said, you'll also see a number that you may not recognize. These are going to be icons that were developed for particular state platforms, and a big benefit of this project is that all of these are being unified, so that anyone can take advantage of them at any point. Any questions at this point? All right, 1 second here. So. Great. In that case, I will move along. Oh, wait. Okay. So another major change that you'll notice when this happens is that the font size has been increased. This was the real doozy. It's a pretty small thing to say. You know, we need to increase the font size on the site, but increasing the font size combined with the mobile responsive design meant that the way all of the pages were flowing changed radically. And that's really what drove us toward some of the new graphics technologies that we're now using, which let us do a bunch of this other work. And this is something that was strongly recommended by the auditor that we worked with for the Montana Legal Services Association. This also feeds into the recommendations coming out of the Ernst & Young evaluation that the tap target across the site be increased for the mobile responsive design. So by increasing the size of the text, all of the links inherently get larger, and so this gets us a very long way on that score, as does a number of changes that we made specifically to address the issue of tap targets. There are also a variety of design articles and research publications that suggest that the new base font size that we'll be using for the site, which is 16 point, is just an industry-wide best practice at this point. It will have an effect on your site, though. You can sort of see here the same article on LawHelp New York rendered on the right in the old font size and on the left in the new font size, particularly on the mobile layout of your site. If you have large amounts of text in the blue box on your home page, or if you have large amounts of text in your sidebar, even looking at the desktop layout of the site, you may find that that text now takes several more lines than it did previously. And you may want to think about the way that that text now looks, and whether you still want to use quite as many words. Everything will work properly. Everything flows in the way that it ought to. So it will display perfectly well, but you will find that various pieces of your site are now taking up relatively more vertical real estate than they did before. And that's a large change that's worth paying attention to. And for all of this, it may not work perfectly because we are still in the process of testing it, but anyone can go to dev.lawhelp.org/ and then the 2-letter postal code for the state or territory where your program is located, and you'll be able to see our test server version of your site. And the test server version should have pretty much all of the changes that we'll be talking about today up and running. It'll be using an older copy of your site, so you may not see all your most recent resources, etc. And there also may be things that are broken here, because we're looking for the things that are broken and working to fix them. But it will give you a feel for what these changes will do to your site specifically. Okay. Another thing that we're doing with the new design is that's a significant change, and I'm talking through these changes in my mind in order of their degree of impact on your sites, is that we are unifying the language features on LawHelp in a much more integrated way. So if you look at a LawHelp site right now, there are two different ways in which LawHelp handles languages other than the default language for the site. There is the mirror, which is accessible through the toggle bar at the top of the site, where the entire site structure will be translated into the alternative language, and you can toggle back and forth. And then there are also in the sidebar here, for a number of sites, access to these language mini portals where the program has not taken the resources to translate the entire site structure. You'll see that things in the header and in the sidebar are still in English, but it will present a limited menu of only the topics that have material available in this case Russian, and links into those sections specifically. And there are a number of problems with the way that this works right now. We still will have this feature. It's good to be able to have support for completely rolling the site into an alternative language, but that's relatively resource intensive. So it's nice to also have this as an option for languages where the program wants to have some degree of support but can't necessarily afford to translate the entire website. But having these two different language behaviors that exist in two different areas on the template can be confusing for people. This is something that we've heard from our consultants. It's also something that we've heard from individual administrators that have been working with users to try and combat some of this confusion. The other major problem with this approach is that the more languages feature available through the sidebar is not present in the mobile layout. So in the mobile layout, you still have access to the site mirrors, but you don't have access to the language subportals. And so one of the things that we set out to do with this next iteration of the mobile responsive design was to include support for the subportals in the mobile layout. So what we've done is we're going to be removing the more languages area in the sidebar so that all of the language material is presented in a single place, which is in the top bar of the site. It looks like that piece of work is not, okay, one moment. Pretty sure I can demonstrate this for you. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry. While you're pulling that up, there are a couple of questions just from a few minutes ago related to some of the initial changes to iconography and styling that I was wondering if you want to respond to those in a moment or wait until you're done this segment. And I can.
Each one of these slides is large and dense, so I'd be happy to do it as we go. Yeah.
Okay. So the first one was from Laura, and it was back on the iconography, and she pointed out that the EY evaluation pointed out a problem that they saw with the consumer icon and government benefits icon, both containing a $sign, and Laura noticed that the new versions that we're proposing here don't seem to address that.
Yes, so that's a very good point. In the interest of, so one of the challenges in my role and trying to coordinate efforts across the community is that I have to find a way to work quickly and to not take up too much of people's time, trying to create consensus at multiple stages, while simultaneously continuing to provide everyone with the support and the features that they would expect. So it is absolutely a problem that there's a $ in both the consumer tag and the government benefits tag. And really, the goal with this first move was to create the closest analog for each of these top icons that we could. The easiest way to address that on your individual site is not to use both of them in your design. And if you then feel as though there is no, there's no good way to differentiate the two of them, then you can come to me and we can look through. There's a whole wealth of options available in the Google material set, and we can try to come up with new ideas. You will notice, Laura, when you look through the full list, that in addition to the price tag, which I'm keeping so that people can continue to use it if they like, there's also a shopping cart now. So if your site is currently using the round $ for public benefits and the price tag for consumer, you could switch to using the shopping cart for consumer, and then you wouldn't have this issue. But that's, I don't want to solve it by taking one or the other out of the library entirely, because I think some people will prefer one and some people will prefer the other. That's the situation where it's going to be incumbent on your program to make choices that are internally consistent for your site.
Great, and it'd be interesting just to hear for people that find a different icon that they think is suitable for either of those, either consumer or government benefits, which at least to my mind is a little bit more challenging to represent. It'd be interesting to hear either on the listserv or if people share with Sam what they arrive at for that.
Yeah, and if people want to commission, you know, it should be relatively easy to commission new designs now, because, you know, underneath each of these icons, I also have a set of rules for, you know, here's the type of file that the person needs to provide, and here are the characteristics that that file must have in order for it to be able to be integrated into this library. And so if you were going to commission a new icon, you know, you would be able to issue an RFP and say, here's our existing library. If you work on this project, you're going to be working within this aesthetic, and here's the type of work product we're going to expect in terms of the characteristics of the file.
Great. And then Sam, Reese asked whether the new heading styles, et cetera, will be pegged as percentages of 16 points.
So in the new layout, yes, there is a base font size for the entire system, and then not only the headings, but every element in the entire layout is now expressed as a percentage of that. So we say, okay, the base font size is 16, and then the whole width of it is, you know, X letters expressed in the base font size, etc. So we're moving away from pixel-based measurements and moving on to relativistic measurements that are determined by the size of the site. And so, you know, this feature has always been there, but you'll notice, I think, that it's not only going to be changing the size of the text in the way that it used to, it's also changing the size of elements on the site so that there's less, things should shift around less jerkily than they did when we were only changing the size of the font.
Great. And then the last question was from Kenneth asking, will there be an option to customize the CSS for each state site?
Yes. So we already, you know, you're already able to customize the CSS for your individual site. You can open up any one of your HTML areas and stick a style tag in it. And if you want an area, if you want me to install an area, Kenneth, on your site that would be specifically for inserting style instructions, we can talk about that. I would probably put it somewhere in the footer for you, and then you would be able to go, you know, scroll down to the footer, click the pencil, and just have a style tag where you can insert statements. So that's something that you can already do. We have reworked the default style sheets for the system so that the degree of changes that you'll be able to make with that technique will be a lot more powerful. You know, I've mentioned, let me see if I can show you. This is just a proof of concept, and this is not something that will be available in July, but this is what we are building toward. You know, the reason why there have been some subtle changes to the colors here is that we've taken the entire LawHelp style sheet and boiled it down to really just 3 color choices with variations on those. And so it'll be possible to choose 3 colors for your template. It's not gonna, oh, my thing's not doing it anymore. 1 minute, I know how to do this for you. It'll be possible to take 3 colors for your template and see how those 3 colors play out across the entire site. So as an example, I'm going to use Hawaii because Hawaii, you'll notice that one of the things that you can do now is you can create your own icon library, but it involves downloading all the icons, opening them up in some kind of software, repainting them, etc. Hawaii has begun to do that. They've also created these image buttons for themselves in their sidebar. And you'll see that they're beginning to define, really a pretty different color palette for their site. But that palette is in tension with the default choices that are made up here. And you could change all of those now, but you would have to change them in many, many, many places. And that, could be prohibitively time-consuming. Whereas in the new system, it's possible to change just 3 lines in the style sheet. And I know I'm getting a little bit technical now, but it's possible to change just 3 lines in the style sheet and have the entire color palette for the site shift. And so now, the colors that are being used in these image buttons to the left are entirely consistent with the other choices in the system. As I said, this is a proof of concept. This is not something that I will be ready to begin working with people on in July, but this is what the next code push is preparing the groundwork for, and this will be the next task that we're going to be tackling in this area, ideally immediately afterward. But I don't want to promise that just yet. The other thing that this does that's worth pointing out is that you'll be able to use CSS to manipulate the colors of icons on your site, which was not previously possible. As I said, you would have to download them and repaint them and then upload them. So the CSS, the ability to work with CSS is there already, but this will expand the range of stuff that you can do feasibly using those features.
And just a related note on that, Lisa commented that she thought the black icons were really sharp and that they show up really well. So Lisa and others, with the groundwork that Sam and the tech team are laying in July with the ability to support more of this customization, you could potentially take advantage of a new color palette or introduce a new color palette that had the black icons like that are shown here. I'm not quite sure this is the right one, like the black and the blue, but but one that might take advantage of those and the stronger contrast that show there.
And it would be right, and it would be relatively, there are these color-wide changes. Let me see if I can get these to shift back to black within here. It's a little bit tricky to do in a browser like this because sometimes it will interpret it as a, let's see. All right. No. So I'm not going to be able to demo it for you on the fly, but essentially one of the things that I've we've been trying to pay attention to is to make sure that you should be able to use CSS to tweak these colors on your own. Although, I think it's worth considering how they look as an overall system, right? And so let me see if I can get that to run here. Yeah. So here, based on the 3 choices that Hawaii made, as I said, this is a proof of concept. I need to tweak this a little bit more, but that given the sort of general island colors that Hawaii is going for, their topic icons might look more like this. But yeah, so for Louisiana, Lisa, we could certainly investigate coming up with something where black would work. Sure. Okay. All right. So moving right along, we talked about the font size. And to get back to this, so languages. The idea here is to prevent confusion by unifying the languages. Oh, that's right, and I have to switch to here because this isn't quite done yet. So you'll notice that the languages sidebar is gone, and so sites that are currently using one of these languages sidebar, we've gotten rid of this widget and we've taken this link down here, which is really the crucial link. This link takes you to a page where you can choose from any of the available portal options. And so that link is going to live in the top bar now. And so you'll have, your mirrors if you have a site mirror, and then you'll have this link that says all languages. And as the site shrinks, that link will shrink down as well. So it says all, and then it just ends up being this little translation symbol and then a plus. And that's because also up here is often the exit site button. And you can kind of see that if LawHelp New York was using an exit site button, this would essentially be all of the space that you can possibly have. And whenever we design for the mobile layout, we have to consider what it will look like on the iPhone 5 because that's the narrowest screen available. And so it comes down to this, but then when you click that, it takes you to this page here that contains all of your options. So in this way, we're going to have all of the language options appear in a single place. That place will be more accessible since it stays on screen even as people scroll. And all of these additional language options that are currently very difficult to get to in the mobile layout will be easily available in the mobile layout. All right, so then another change that's going to be coming is that the floating set location button in the lower right-hand corner that you may be familiar with from the mobile layout is going to be getting a pop-up. So when you click on it, there's a pop-up that explains what this is about. We got some feedback from the mobile responsive auditor that this feature is not the easiest to interpret as is, and we've had some really good success with using A/B testing in LawHelp New York. Oh, right, I've got to click off it to get it to disappear. Using A/B testing in LawHelp New York to determine that a pop-up explaining the LiveHelp button has really increased visitors' engagement with that button. That's something I'm going to be talking to LiveHelp specifically about in the near future. I don't want to get into it now, but you'll start to notice this set location button here on this feature, and you can change that text if you want, but this is what it says by default, to set your location to get more useful information. Okay, so then some significant changes to the way organization profiles and organization sub-profiles are laid out. As most of you I'm sure are aware, right now if you browse to an organization, I'm going to go and use I'm going to use LawHelp Montana just because it has a good example for you to riff on. So you can have the sort of top-level profile for an organization, which contains some general information and then offers people a choice. If it's an organization that has slightly different services based on different sub-areas, and you get this general profile and then this very long list of all of your different options. And then when you actually choose one of these options, you again end up with a pretty long list of material where all of the different information just kind of comes one thing after the other. And so this was an area where the mobile responsive design auditor that we worked with in partnership with Montana Legal Services Association just thought that we should make an effort to try and make these friendlier. And what we came up with, and here, so I'm sort of switching back and forth between the work that's already being tested on our test server and work that is, and that's not going to work anymore, is it? Let me see if I can find a live demo of this. There may not be a live demo available at the moment. But essentially what we've done is we've taken the really long list of subtopics and turned it into a chooser bar that appears at the top of the main profile. So you can click this and they all drop down, and then you pick one, and then that takes you to the sub-profile. And in the sub-profile, see if I can get this to work. All right, so you can choose one, and then it's going to take us to the sub-profile. And I think the sub-profile is still, yeah, we're still in the process of constructing this. So it's going to be difficult. Yeah, it's going to be difficult for me to show you a live demonstration. But essentially, we've riffed on the Guide Me layout that we came up with in 2015 in partnership with the Legal Aid Society of Oklahoma. Oh boy, is it 10:53 already? My goodness. All right. Yeah, in the interest of time, I'm not going to show it to you live, but essentially, the sub-profile, all of this information that you see on the screen here now, splits into 3 tabs. There's a general information tab, a tab that contains all of the different service areas. So here, there will be one tab that contains the phone contact and the appointment contact and the mail contact and the walk-in contact and the clinic. And those would all be sort of drop-downs using the FAQ feature. And then the final tab that just contains the general contact information, the phone number, the mailing address, etc. And you can toggle between them. And breaking up the information using the Guide Me in this way and using the FAQ in this way should make these subtopic profiles much easier to use and navigate. That's something that you will be able to see on dev.lawhelp.org/your postal code in the very near future. Sub-profiles always be based just on subject areas. That's a very good question, Reese. That's definitely an issue. We should talk. I've run into similar problems with the Legal Aid Society of Hawaii, and we came up with some pretty clever workarounds to deal with the system as is. This is the place where we push the envelope farthest in terms of making cosmetic changes that are going to have a significant impact on the way the pages actually flow and the impression that visitors get of the structure. but the work that we were doing here in terms of the mobile responsive audit and tying that to the visual design components of the EY evaluation to try to get as much done at once as we possibly could meant that issues like the one you're raising in your question were just not something that we could address within the scope of the project we were working on. I hope that makes sense. That's a good segue into what I want to spend the last few minutes talking about. There's less time for this than I had hoped, and I apologize for that, but this is just the beginning, so there will be many opportunities to talk about this again with me. I will I'll send around a link again to the survey that went out a couple of weeks ago. Thanks to everybody that took the time to fill it out. If you haven't taken the time to fill it out yet, I would encourage you, if you're using the LawHelp platform, to fill out the survey when it goes around the listserv again. And the survey is in two parts. One is sort of looking at what we're currently doing with the LawHelp platform and areas, how people feel about the different pieces of the system. And the second part is trying to think in more abstract terms about what all of our programs are trying to achieve for our clients and what we need in order to achieve those goals. And I think it's important to think in really broad terms because we've reached a point where it's time to find we're reaching a point where it's going to become beneficial to think about a new baseline from which we can build going forward. We've done a lot of work on the LawHelp platform, in version 3 that has been responding to changes, and it's kept up in a lot of ways with those changes, whether it's the recent work with the mobile responsive design or the triage tool that we were able to come up with in partnership with the Legal Aid Society of Hawaii last year. But we're also approaching a moment where the environment in which we are doing our work looks very, very different than the environment that LawHelp 3 was initially imagined in. And a lot of the sort of core assumptions that exist within the platform don't necessarily fit the environment we find ourselves in increasingly. And this is why this is the right moment to begin this conversation. And there are 3 points that I want to make in that area in the 2 minutes I have left. First, when I'm talking about our environment, our audience is website independent increasingly, and I'll explain what that means. It's also more and more mobile dependent compared with the situation when LawHelp 3 was initially designed and launched. And also, increasingly we have really great socio-legal studies research that helps us better understand how our clients behave and what their needs are and what kind of challenges they face that have an impact on their ability to get legal assistance or to attack their legal problems that aren't necessarily legal issues per se. So first, let's talk about website independence. So when LawHelp 3 was created in 2012, Siri, the first AI voice assistant, had just been released on the super high-end, expensive iPhone 4S. Facebook Messenger had just launched, and Knowledge Graph, which was Google's first crack at a semantic microdata format, was a few months away from its release. So all of these things were sort of just beginning to happen. And really, if you went on the internet, if you went online, it meant that you were visiting one or more websites. Websites and the internet were essentially synonymous. In the time since then, I think that the internet is no longer synonymous with using websites, right? There are lots of ways to use the internet without using websites. You can talk to Siri and ask Siri or Google Now or Alexa a question, and that service will go and use the internet to get information and bring it back to you without ever going through a website. You can talk with a chatbot and get all kinds of information, whether that's within Facebook Messenger or a mobile app or whatever, and you are getting information from the internet without interacting with the website. Search engines like Google have begun presenting structured search results where they're pulling information out of websites, and instead of delivering a link to the website as the result of the search, the information itself just shows up in the screen. You can see this if you do searches on Google for things like the flu, or prior to the election, if you were looking for your polling place, or if you're looking for a movie showtime, these kinds of things appear directly in Google now. On the right, you'll see a screenshot. That's a photo that I took of a slide that Margaret Hagan put up at a recent conference, imagining what structured search results for legal services topics might look like if we're able to achieve these kinds of integrations. And this means that really, if people are using the internet without using websites, then we need to think about the information that we maintain and that we want to deliver to people independently from the website. That will still be our primary strategy, but that will be one of a number of strategies that we will be using to deliver that information going forward. And that's a huge shift that I think can be served by taking a step back and thinking about what a new version, what the next, what comes next for us as a program. Secondly, mobile dependency. We've talked about this before. We've been talking about the growth of the use of smartphones on our sites for several years, and it's been a while since a majority of visits were happening on mobile devices. What's significant about 2017, and the way that I'm measuring this, I can only measure a maximum of 90 days at a time, which is why you're seeing the most recent 3-month period. But what's significant in 2017 that we're seeing is not only our maximum, our majority of visits coming from people visiting with mobile devices, but a majority of visitors only ever use a mobile device. So it's not necessarily accurate to imagine that there are people who are coming on their phone and then finding something which they email to themselves or download so that they can use it later on their desktop. These are people who, across multiple visits, we have never seen them use a desktop. So in all likelihood, the mobile phone is their only window into this information. And so that suggests a whole new set of strategies about how we might think about site design, where the mobile layout is going to be the most important one to think about. And when you imagine how your site looks, when we imagine how the platform looks, we're going to want to start from here and then build outward toward the desktop. And then finally, a number of social legal studies researchers, including most notably Professor Rebecca Sanford, have been doing really great research in recent years that has created a really rich picture of the kinds of challenges that people were trying to help face. And this is a great moment to take the fruits of that research and try to distill them into a new environment with new baseline assumptions that are informed by our expanded knowledge. And so the next step for this is going to be, more research. You can see we've been thinking pretty hard about a number of these different trends. We've been trying to figure out what they mean and what we need to pay attention to, but we've got to really dig into this stuff, and that's also going to mean, that I will be reaching out to you more. This survey is just the first step, and over the course of the next few months, we're going to be doing a lot of thinking about what what people's needs are, what kind of options we have when we think about how to meet those needs, and then hopefully in the relatively near future, we will have some ideas that result from this process that we can bring before the community so that we can have a conversation about particular strategies that we might pursue and the merits of one over another as we move forward with this. So it's 11:05. I know we had some technical difficulties, but we still managed to get through pretty much everything that I wanted to talk with you all about. Lots of very large topics came up on this call. A few things that I will highlight. I really encourage you to look at this article, which is about the icons. I encourage you, if you haven't already, to take the survey. I'll send the link to the article and the link to the survey around the listserv after the call is over. And then I also encourage you to go to dev.lawhelp.org/ and then the 2-letter code for your state or territory, and take a look at how all these changes are likely to play out on your site. Just keep in mind that the whole purpose of this dev.lawhelp is that we're testing stuff. And so it may be that you see something and you say this is really a problem, and it turns out that it's just broken. And that's the point. This is where we break things. That's the whole purpose of this. But it should also give you, if you want more information about how this is gonna work or what your site might look or feel like, doing a little bit of exploration here will give you a very good feel for what may happen to your site when these changes go live in the first week or two of July. That's it for me. Any further questions? Okay. Thanks very much, everybody.
Sam. This is Danielle. Sorry. So when we're testing our sites in the dev environment, and we see things that need to be addressed or fixed, how do we go about, getting that all fixed before the switch happens in July?
Well, so if it's a problem with the platform, I think the first step would be to email me, and I'll be able to take a look at it and tell, okay, this is a bug with the new stuff we're doing, and we've got to fix it here, or okay, this is something that you did on your site that will need to be corrected, and we can work through the most the quickest way to correct that. So something that I've seen a fair bit, actually, for example, is currently the base font size for the site is 12. And some people, probably just by pasting things in from Microsoft Word or something like that, have written content for their site where it's hard-coded as size 12. And you don't notice that right now because the hard coding is the same as the base for the site. But when everything moves to 16, you'll see that some stuff is still at 12, and it's because it's hard coded into that article. So that's probably the most common thing that I've seen that would be an example of, a change that's on your end. And I'll be diving in to try to help people, with that kind of stuff as much as I possibly can. I've even been trying to write some rules where it's really clear-cut what's happening. I've been trying to write rules that will go in and take that out on people's behalf, but it can be very challenging to try to figure out which things are intentional and desirable and which things are not. It's not challenging for a human, but it's challenging to write a computer rule that will capture only the unintentional stuff and not things that people meant to do. And I don't want to write things that will, accidentally erase a bunch of work that people have done. So,
okay,
so there's a tricky balance there.
We should be going through all of our HTML type content, like resources, and making sure on the dev site that the text is the correct size. And I'm just trying to make sure I know exactly what to go through before this gets flipped.
So, right. So the font size 12 thing, for example, if it gets flipped and the font on one of the articles on your site is still size 12, it will work just as well as it's currently working. It just won't be able to take advantage of the fact that we've moved everybody to a new system that's using the new best practice for how big the text should be. I won't be able to automatically bring that improvement to you because you've accidentally hard-coded font size 12 into that particular article. So, one way to look at it would be that you want to, do a systematic review of all of this stuff, but that's not our intention to create a situation where people have to do all of that. So the kinds of things that you should notice, if you see something that's just totally screwy, then we definitely have to talk about it. But the kinds of things that you would notice that would be something where I would say, well, that's up to you, are the kinds of things where if that article is font size 12, until somebody gets around to, whenever it was scheduled to be reviewed or updated in the normal course of business, that just means that it takes a little bit longer for that one to be delivered at 16 the way it's supposed to be. But the people that are reading it are no worse off in July than they were in June.
Okay.
So I wonder, Sam, I'm just thinking that there may be some, in addition to the article, maybe next week, or late this week or next week, we can send around a few bullet points to the listserv that just provides a little bit of guidance on exactly the kinds of things that you're describing there in response to Danielle, to help people sort of understand what to know, what to look out for, and then for folks who aren't on this call as well to have that info, because just to make use, Danielle, and others who are on the call, make sure that as you're doing this review on dev, you're looking for the things that are going to be worth you flagging to Sam or maybe considering fixing on your end.
Right, and absolutely, and the biggest one that I mentioned already is places where simply because it's working entirely as intended. In the current design, right, 20 words might take 3 lines in the sidebar at a given font size. But when everything increases, that might take 8 lines in the sidebar. And then you're looking at your sidebar and it gets very long.
I'm looking at the topic areas right now, and all of the, on the main page and all of the subtopics listed under those, there's really not a lot of space for those, and they're really, stacking very lengthy, So we're going to have to get creative, I think, with our subtopic names to make them.
And I'll point out, if you look at I forget which page it is in the EY summary report, but they talk about shortening the names for areas of the site as one of the things that they recommend doing. So, we've worked pretty hard. Like this all flows. It doesn't look broken, but you're right that it does take up more space when you increase the font size. And it's very tricky because really all of these recommendations just kind of work together, and some of them are things that we have to do here and some of them are things that you have to do there. And but I think even though even if you didn't have time to do that work right now, this is making progress toward all of the different goals that EY set out for the community in the most graceful way possible, so that even if it's in sort of an interim stage where we've increased the size of our text, but we haven't decreased the length of our labels, the result is not is totally functional and not visually jarring.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at it right now, and even the term "more issues" that follows all of the subtopics is on 2 lines. And so you can't.
That's a good. That's a good point. One moment, let me take a look because I'm pretty sure. Oh yeah, that is a very good point.
It looks like it's almost too restrictive, is what I'm saying, in terms of the amount of characters you can have. So I don't know if there's any. if there's any like way that the icons could be a little smaller, or, I don't know, but it seems like there needs to be a little more room there for the subtopic
Right.
title.
Well, so I mean, what can we do with this? We can.
Well, I think just, I know we're well over, so I think, you know, Danielle, this is exactly the kind of feedback that I think is helpful at this point. And, you know, if folks are available and want to stay on with Sam, I think, you know, feel free, but otherwise, obviously, feel free to reach out to us individually with questions, big or small, about what the changes represent. And then I think we'll look to get a little bit more guidance out to the listserv to help structure your own testing.
That'd be great.
All right. Yeah, and I really appreciate the comment. This particular thing I think should be pretty easy to fix because the more issues statement, you know, that particular statement should be easy to extend so that it runs, you know, across this entire length here. So that is something that I can do. As far as what to do here, we could try shifting to a two-topic column. You know, like another challenge is, as I said earlier, one of the things that I've been trying to do with this work is hold as many things the same as I possibly can, so that these changes are minimally jarring to people, so that we can make progress as quickly as we can. You know, the mobile responsive audit is part of TIG work that we took on for this year in partnership with the Montana Legal Services Association, and one of the you know, one of the major recommendations that came out of that audit was to increase all of the font size of all of the text on the site. And this is a perfect example of you know, how challenging it can be to accommodate even that very simple statement.
Right. Okay.
But that particular critique is definitely something that I can address, and I'll show you the results. And if people want to take a look at this and give me other feedback like that, I will do my utmost to incorporate as much of it as I can.
So I know we're well over time, so it sounds like we should probably wrap up here, but for folks should obviously feel free to reach out to Sam individually about any questions about what he's walked through today or specific things you might be seeing as if you've already checked out the dev site. Otherwise, we'll send out some additional context and updates about the testing process that we'd suggest for this late this week or early next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Sam.
Great. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Sam.